The best thing about the meals deduction in 2022 is the 100% write-off. If you're a business, you can take a 100% write-off for meals purchased from restaurants. The limit is normally 50%. Meals not purchased from a restaurant are still deducted at 50%. We will get into a strategy for the deduction of restaurant meals purchased after 2022 a little later in the video. As you know, the restaurant industry was hit really hard by the pandemic. The government decided to help the restaurant industry by encouraging business owners to purchase food from restaurants during 2021 and 2022. Meals from grocery stores, convenience stores, vending machines, liquor stores, or specialty food stores don't qualify for the 2022 100% meals deduction. Also, cafeterias or other employer-related eateries don't qualify for the 100% meal deduction, even if they're operated by a third party. These meals can be deducted at 50%. To receive the 100% meal deduction, you have to keep receipts to prove that a meal was from an actual restaurant. Meals are either 100%, 50%, or non-deductible. I'm not going to go over all of the items and their categories, but here's a chart. There are a few things that I would just like to point out though. 1, you can't deduct entertainment expenses, ever. And any meals that are provided at places of entertainment might not be deductible if an IRS examiner cannot determine what portion is for meals. Number 2, after 2025, water, coffee, and snacks for the office will become non-deductible. Number 3, office meetings for stockholders, S corporation shareholders, and sole proprietors can only be written off at 50%. And 4, since the 100% deduction for meals expired at the end of 2022, going forward, restaurant meals can only be deducted at 50%. So here's a strategy that you can consider in order to take restaurant meals at 100% after 2022. If you're able to provide the meals to your employees for your convenience and you provide the restaurant meals on your business premises, under certain conditions, you can write off 100% of these meals for your employees. In order to meet the convenience of the employer test, you must provide meals to more than 50% of your employees, and you must meet one of these 4 tests. Number 1, the employees must be on the premises for emergency calls during the lunch period, and emergencies are expected to occur. 2, employees are restricted to a 30 or 45-minute meal period, and employees can't eat anywhere else because the period is too short. 3, employees have to remain on premises because they are not able to go get food within a reasonable amount of time. Or 4, you are providing meals to restaurant employees. If you are a shareholder of an S corporation or you are a sole proprietor and you eat with your employees during one of these convenience of the employer lunches, your meal would not be deductible. But you could remove your portion of the cost of the meal from the 100% classification and put it under meetings instead. This way, you will receive a 50% deduction for your portion versus no deduction at all. For example, if you have a convenience of the employer lunch meeting for 5 out of your 10 employees and the meal costs $120, you would take $100 at 100% for employee meals and write off 50% of $20 under the meetings category for the owner's portion. Now, there are a couple of things that apply to all meals. The business owner or an employee of the business must be present during the meal. And although this is really subjective, the meal cannot be lavish. With meals that are non-travel related, you can only deduct the actual cost. For meals during business travel, there are 2 ways that you can account for your meal expenses. You can either use actual cost or the standard meal allowance. With actual cost, if the meal is more than $75, you need receipts, invoices, or bills to prove your expenses. Otherwise, you won't need receipts for meals under the actual cost method. If you're writing off 100% of restaurant meals in 2022 and you're using the actual cost method, you still need receipts regardless. In any case, you should always keep a detailed record of meals. The standard meal allowance is a set daily amount for meals and incidental expenses while away on travel. The set amount varies depending on the location of the business trip. The IRS publishes per diem rates once a year that includes a separate breakdown for meals. With the standard meal allowance, if you are using an accountable plan, Employees don't need receipts to get reimbursed, and the business gets a 100% deduction for the standard rate. If you travel to more than one location in one day, you would use the rate for the area where you stop to sleep. The nice thing about the 100% restaurant meals deduction for 2022 is that you can use the standard allowance and still write off 100% of restaurant meals without having to prove that meals were purchased from restaurants. Please keep in mind that you can use the standard meal allowance for travel related to investments and other income-producing assets like real estate. And you can also use it for travel for qualified education expenses. You can't use the standard meal allowance for meals when you travel for medical or for charity. For both the day that you leave and the day that you return from a business trip, you can only take a portion of the standard meal allowance. You can calculate this in one of two ways. Method 1, you can claim 75% of the standard meal allowance for the day that you leave and 75% for the day that you return. Or method 2, you can use any method that you consistently apply that is reasonable. So who wouldn't use the second method, right? For example, let's say that you own a business and you live in Texas. In August, you went on a 3-day trip to Universal Orlando to attend a seminar related to your business. You fly out on day 1 and fly back to Texas on day 3. Under method 2, since you are not a federal employee, you could take the full 3 days of the standard meal allowance as opposed to method 1, where you would be limited to only 2.5 days. You just have to make sure that you use method 2 for all of your trips. Transportation workers have a special standard allowance for 2022 of $69 for a full day and $51.75 for a partial day in the continental US. If you are a transportation worker, using the special rate keeps you from having to determine the standard meal allowance for everywhere you stop for sleep. If you use the special rate for any trip, then you must use the special rate for all trips that you take during the year. Travel expenses can get a little detailed, so I plan to make a video specifically about travel expenses. If you travel a lot for business, please be sure to subscribe to catch that video. One more thing that I want to point out is that W-2 wage earners cannot deduct meal expenses on their personal returns. They should be reimbursed by their employer instead. If you are an employer and you are not reimbursing your employees under an accountable plan, then you will have to include meal reimbursements in wages and pay payroll taxes on the reimbursements. If you establish an accountable plan, make sure that your employees give you a detailed expense report each month. If you need to know more about setting up an accountable plan, please take a look at this video. Also, check out the description box below for templates that you can use to set up an accountable plan. Above anything though, make sure that you take advantage of the 2022 100% restaurant deduction because a deduction like this may never happen again. Thank you for spending time with me, and see you next time.